Well, hello everyone out there, and welcome back to another Thomas Wooden Railway discussion. And since it is February 14th, I want to wish everyone out there a happy Valentine's Day. And speaking of things that we love, I thought it would be immensely appropriate to take a look at the 1994 version of Sir Topham Hatt's car. Because, as you're going to see in just a moment, I absolutely adore this model. Now, I'm kind of joking here because, as you're going to see, this model isn't exactly the greatest in wooden railway history. There are a number of flaws with it, but nonetheless, I kind of just wanted to make a Valentine's Day joke. So, yes, this is the 1994 version of Sir Topham Hatt's car. And remembering that the Thomas Wooden Railway line was started in 1992, this is actually one of the earliest models that you could go out and buy in store. It's actually one of the very first road vehicles you could go out and buy because, let's see, there's Terrence, which was 1992, and the Crosby Station cargo truck, which was early, and I think Birdie was 1994, and of course you have Harold, but Harold's not really a road vehicle. He's kind of, I mean, he's like a non-track vehicle per se. But yes, this is one of like the first like cars or trucks that you could go out and buy for the Thomas Wooden Railway line. If you know anything about Thomas and Friends history and anything about Sir Topham Hatt's car in that regard, the one thing that's probably sticking out to you right now is that this car is not blue. In the Railway series and in the TV series, for as long as anybody can remember, Sir Topham Hatt's mode of transportation when it comes to his car here, it's always been a blue car. And yes, there are a few exceptions, but most of those exceptions are like from magazine stories or kind of like one-off stories that aren't really part of the Thomas universe. So to get an official piece of merchandise that's painted this color, bright yellow, instead of blue, is a bit shocking, and I'm going to explain why that was done in just a little bit. But very quickly, I want to bring out the, I guess the second or third generation of Sir Topham Hatt's car, however you want to look at it. And this is how Sir Topham Hatt's car is supposed to look. Granted, it's a little squished, but there's this like iconic radiator grill area here at the front that, in my opinion, it's in like the shape of a shield, but most importantly, it's got this very nice blue color. So we'll go back to that in just a moment. So having said that, this version of Sir Topham Hatt's car is just flat out odd. Looking at the design and the shape of it, you can definitely tell and presume that this was made in the 1990s because this car is very stocky. It's kind of blockish. It's not very aerodynamic or streamlined. And if you were to go back and look at cars from like the 1980s or the 1990s, especially the 1980s, they were just very blocky in a sense, and they didn't look good. Obviously, looking back on it now, sort of in the 1990s is when they started to become, you know, more aerodynamic in a sense. So this Thomas Wooden Railway item just screams 1990s, in my opinion. It's a very blocky, sort of awkward Thomas Wooden Railway model for sure. So I've already talked about and touched on, you know, the fact that this car is not blue for some reason, and reportedly, according to the internet, which anybody can write anything on the internet nowadays, the reason that this car was not painted blue and it was painted yellow instead is because a lady named Britt Alcroft, who basically ran the Thomas and Friends TV series at the time, she personally asked the creator of the Thomas Wooden Railway line, his name was Roy Wilson, she personally asked him to design this car and paint it yellow so that presumably it would stand out on shelves. Now, I understand that because, you know, at the time there's not a whole lot of other Thomas Wooden Railway characters out there. For example, Thomas is blue, so it's like, do you want to sell a blue car up against a blue train? So I get that part of it. But I think at the same time, the decision to paint this yellow also kind of sealed this car's fate. It was only sold for like 3 years. There was a minor upgrade the following year in 1995, which I'll get to in a moment. But I'm just trying to figure out, like, who is this car meant for? If you're a fan of Thomas the Tank Engine, you know, when you walk into a store in the 1990s and you see this for sale, you automatically realize, oh, it's yellow. Well, that's not what Sir Topham Hatt's car is supposed to look like, and you probably bypass it. If you're not a fan of Thomas the Tank Engine, and I don't know, you're just looking at toys for some reason, you're like, okay, it's a yellow car. It certainly caught my eye because that's what yellow things do. They catch your eye before anything else. But who is the man in the top hat, and like who is he supposed to be? Because at the time, remember, there is no writing on the bottom of these toys. Obviously, it would have said on the packaging, it would have said Sir Topham Hatt's car, but then that also begs the question, who is Sir Topham Hatt? And granted, you could use some, observational skills and probably guess, well, this man has a top hat, so he's probably an important figure, and it says STH on the back here, so maybe if I put two and two together, maybe I can kind of understand that, but nonetheless, I hope you kind of see the conundrum there. A blue car would have satisfied the Thomas the Tank Engine fans because it would have been accurate, but a yellow car, granted it probably did stand out on shelves, it's really not meant for the Thomas the Tank Engine fan. So I think the fact that this car never had a face, which I don't think it should have a face. I think there are some things in the Thomas universe that don't they don't need to have faces. It just kind of adds to the the realism in a sense, and also the fact that Thomas the Tank Engine takes place in a regular world where there are cars and trains and other forms of machinery out there that don't have faces. But I think the fact that this didn't have a face, sort of like with the Crosby Station cargo truck, the second you don't put a face on a form of Thomas Wooden Railway merchandise, or any merchandise for that matter, your item just immediately becomes forgettable. You sell normal trucks that don't have faces, and it's like, so what? But you sell troublesome trucks that have faces and these goofy expressions, and suddenly everybody wants them. So in my opinion, this car was kind of doomed from the start. There's nothing really special about it. Granted, they did give us like this silhouette of Sir Topham Hatt. Interesting though, if the island of Sodor is supposed to be located where we think it's supposed to be located, which is off of the Isle of Man, in the European vicinity of things, then Sir Topham Hatt is driving a left-hand or a left-side drive car, which is technically opposite, because if you were to drive a car somewhere in Europe, or specifically Great Britain, Sir Topham Hatt should be seated on the right side. So I just thought that's a little bit of trivia. He's technically on the wrong side of the car, but who knows? We shouldn't judge. Maybe Sir Topham Hatt really likes his left-hand side drive cars for some reason. So at least we got a silhouette. A really cool part of this model, I've kind of been nagging on it this whole time, but I really do like this part. Back here, this is supposed to be a license plate, and for one thing, big kudos to Sir Topham Hatt for getting a personalized license plate with the letters STH. That must have been really hard to get, considering there's probably a lot of other people out there who wanted such simple number combinations a long time ago, but somehow in the 1990s he got this. STH obviously stands for Sir Topham Hatt. Interestingly, it does not say TFC for the Fat Controller. It says STH for Sir Topham Hatt because that's his actual name. That's just like a nice touch of detailing. Like if the back of this car here was just plain, it'd be super forgettable, and honestly just like a very generic car. You'd almost think like they stole it from another toy company or something like that. But this STH license plate on the back here is a really nice touch. I personally like it. The 1995 version, which came out a year later than this, had a few changes, and one of the biggest changes, or like the only change, was that this license plate area, for some reason, was made white. Right now it's in a black outline, and they did it in a white outline. I'm not really sure why that was done, but one thing, if you go and take a look at a picture of it on the internet, it becomes very hard to see. It kind of blends in with the yellow. So I don't know why they made that change personally, and I'm not biased here just because I have this one model, but I do like the black license plate more. So like I said, it was released in 1994, therefore it has one of these odd-shaped flat magnets. Good thing they didn't stick it on the front here, because that would just look really awkward. But something interesting about the magnets. So if I pull up this Thomas, and you'd think, this is the way it's supposed to go. Like if the car is facing frontward and Thomas is facing frontward, the connection like this should be, pretty simple, and you'd obviously expect that. With these older style of magnets, and one of the reasons why they probably got rid of them, there's still a chance that they can, marry up like that, which is a little bit weird. For example, if I had another, newer Thomas like this, and I tried to do that with this Thomas here, that wouldn't work. So obviously the connection is stronger this way, but there's still a little bit of a magnetic connection this way. Obviously when I just slightly pull it, it comes apart, whereas here, Hopefully you can see, like, I actually have to put a good deal of pull into it to release it. But interestingly, my point that I'm making here is these magnets on the front, which I think are supposed to represent headlights. Maybe I'm totally wrong there. That's just what they kind of represent to me. But take a look at this. So, I was like, okay, the magnet on the back here is obviously one way. There's a little bit of bleed over into the other direction, but that's very common for those types of magnets. So what is the direction of these magnets on the front? So I connect Thomas up here to both of them, and the connection seems pretty strong. And so I'm thinking, okay, it's kind of a toss-up. Like, it's not super strong, but at the same time, there's definitely a connection there. So if I flip Thomas around, which, this is what we were doing before, we're just in the opposite direction. So technically, you think this would be the correct way. There's still a connection there, but at the same time, it's not particularly strong. And I flip Thomas around again, and hopefully you guys can see that. It's like these magnets on the front here are dual-way magnets. So take that, Mighty Mac. For those who don't know, the Mighty Mac model had two-way magnets, which allowed it to basically connect up to anything, with the exception of itself, which is something kind of funny. But I'm pretty sure, unless these magnets are so old that I don't even know if it's possible for them to like flip their magnetic poles or something like that, but I'm pretty sure these are dual-way magnets. I'm not just making that up. So hopefully that makes sense. I kind of did a little science experiment before I started this video, and I kind of noticed that. So I thought I would mention it. Super interesting. On the bottom here, like I said, there's no name. There's kind of this wear and tear where the axles are. You can kind of see it there on these three corners. But then up top here, that same wear and tear is not as visible or present. You can kind of see like a big chunk out of the wood here has been taken out. But up here, I don't know if that was repaired by the former owner or something like that. So I guess the one nice thing about this is that it's obviously all made out of wood, which is something you don't see nowadays. But yes, it does have a very chunky appearance. It's obviously from a different era of Thomas and Friends toys, and considering it's not the right paint color, you could just write it off as a collector's item. Nobody, with the exception of somebody like myself who's really into Thomas Wooden Railway, nobody out there is going to want something like this. So there was one other thing I was going to talk about. The wheels here on the bottom, they're a little bit thin, but that's what you would have gotten back in the 1994 days. I guess I'll just bring in, I talked about this earlier. I'll bring in, this is like from 2008 or so. And yes, it's the right color, which is good. But it kind of has this convertible feel, and in my opinion is obviously more toyish. We get kind of a Topham Hat that bobs up and down there and makes a really awkward screechy noise. And then, really quick, the only other form of merchandise that I have a Topham Hat's car in at the present is this. I think this is actually the Adventures. As you can see, big similarities there just between the style and the grill and everything like that. So I thought I would mention that. But in terms of finding this item on eBay, I've actually been searching for this item for a long time. I've just been waiting for the right deal to pop up, and I didn't actually get this until a few months ago. And so considering this has been on like my want list for a really long time, years now, considering I just only picked it up shows you just how rare and possibly how highly sought after they are. For a while, I remember a couple years ago or even like a few months ago, their prices dipped because eBay is all about supply and demand. So if there are more on the site, usually the price goes down because there's more competition. So for a while there, you could pick up one of these for between like $25 and $50, which I think, that's a good price. Like in the scheme of things, that for a block of wood, a huge ripoff. But for a Thomas Wooden Railway vintage model like this one, that's a pretty good deal. So I can't remember what I picked this one up for. I want to say like $30 or so. It was with a pack of some other engines. But then since then and in past years, this has actually been a very expensive item to try and go out and get. I see them in the hundreds of dollars for some time, which is just flat out insane. But I think my point is that since I only just recently picked this up and it's been on like my want list for a very long time, I think that shows you just how few of them are out there and just how kind of like crazy people go with the prices sometimes. Because in a way, remember I talked about how, they made it yellow so that it would stand out. Well, in a way, these people who sell this item on eBay have no idea, what it really is, and they're like, oh, it's a bright, shiny yellow car. It's their Topham Hatt's car. I can sell it for a fortune and make tons of money. Whereas, you look at it for what it is. It's a block of wood with some plastic wheels on that, and it really shouldn't be worth that much. So, with these sort of discussions, I always kind of recommend should you get this item or not. And really, I don't recommend getting this item unless you're a big Thomas Wooden Railway fan who kind of just likes the quirky items out there. I mean, it's the wrong color, it's kind of the wrong shape of car, and, it's just old and clunky. So, it's not like anybody's going to go out and use this in their thriving Thomas Wooden Railway series, I don't think, because there are plenty of other options out there that are not only painted blue, but they just look better in general. So, really, unless you want this car, unless there's something that pulls you towards it, for example, I wouldn't shell out the money and go get it or anything like that. Since I really am just a fan of the Thomas Wooden Railway line in general, I thought this would be a good addition. Of course, I can make a video on it and just kind of showcase all the ins and outs and just how weird it is and everything like that. So with these Thomas Wooden Railway discussions, I always want to hear your guys' feedback. What do you think about it? Do you think it's sort of an interesting model? Obviously, I think as time has gone on, people are like, that's just flat out strange because it's not painted blue, and it's just this very old style of car, of automobile that really nobody sees nowadays. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I've had a really fun time doing this Thomas Wooden Railway discussion. I want to thank you all so much for watching. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, happy Valentine's Day. Hope you guys have a great day. And I'll see you on the next Thomas Wooden Railway discussion.